Today we are going to have an analysis of this Dressing a Wounded Economy that appeared in the Hindu 26th March 2020, written by C. Rajan. This article has been written in the context of COVID-19 outbreak and the possible impact on Indian economy. In this article, C. Rangarajan has emphasized on 4 channels of economic impact. These 4 are external demand, domestic demand, supply disruption, and financial market disruption. Let us see one by one. First one is external demand. Since this corona crisis is pandemic, even developed countries are facing this crisis. So from those countries, the demand for goods and services from India are likely to decline. Given this decline, India's exports are going to decline. We must say here that India has an edge in export of services. For example, IT industry, IT enabled services, tourism sector. So these services sectors are also going to be affected by this pandemic prevailing in developed countries in the West, Europe, America, all these countries. While dealing with this external demand, C. Rangarajan has also emphasized on one aspect. Recently it was in news that there is fall in oil prices, and people are saying that this will be cushion for India's oil import bill, given this bleak India's exports that we may face. But this fall in oil prices has some concerns also. He is saying that if this oil prices are going to be low, then the oil exporting countries are going to face economic problem, and then their capacity to absorb Indian labor will also reduce. So it's a challenge for Indian labor. We must see here that West Asia is a favorite destination for Indian laborers, and we have millions of Indian laborers who are there, who are working there, and they are good source of remittances for India. So this is one aspect in balance of payment for India also. So at this point we may face problem. Anyways, apart this, the second channel of economic impact he is saying is domestic demand. So domestic demand, we can see that lockdown is already there, economic activities have been stalled, and transportation activities are also not available there. People are buying less, and shops are stocking less. Already economic uncertainty is there. So given all these things, the retail sector will be first affected. C. Rangarajan is emphasizing on this, that retail sector will be first affected because people are now buying less. Now there is less and less number of people in the market buying goods, and there is that usual normal condition is not there. So there will be contraction in demand, and when this contraction in demand is there, the production units are going to face this heat. And given this, the production units are also going to now use some tools like downsizing or cost cutting. For example, laying off of non-permanent employees, because production may face fall, then they may lay off the non-permanent employees. So this is a vicious cycle, in fact, that the demand is contracting, then the production is facing the problem, then because of the problem faced in production units, laying off of non-permanent employees, so unemployment will rise. When unemployment will rise, then there will be less capacity to buy goods, the consumption will further be less. So a vicious cycle is there. Again, demand consumption will be less, demand will be less, production will be less. So the vicious cycle is going on. Then the third channel he is speaking about is supply disruption. This supply disruption, he is speaking from 2 dimensions. One is from external sector, and the other is the domestic sector. From external sector, he is saying that 60% of our imports is in category of intermediate goods. How? Let us take one example of active pharmaceutical ingredients that we import from China, and this API is very much important for the pharmaceuticals industry of India. Similarly, we can see that we import gold, and that is an important input for our gems and jewelry industry. Similarly, we import crude oil, and that is an important input for our exports of petroleum products. So he is saying that this is going to be disrupted. The supply for this import, which ultimately serve as intermediate goods for many production activities in India, that is going to be impacted. This is one thing. Then on domestic side also, he is saying that interstate movement of goods will get slowed down, and this will disrupt the domestic supply chain also. For example, recently I saw that almost 50 lakh truck drivers are stranded on the roads. So This means that the supply chain of goods from one part of the country to another part of the country is going to be affected. For example, onion is produced in one part of the country and it is transported to the other part of the country. If this supply chain is getting affected, then the inflation is going to be up. So this is another third dimension, supply disruption he is speaking about. Then the fourth one is financial market disruption. On this aspect, we can see how the Sensex and Nifty has responded. They have responded very quickly to the corona pandemic, and in fact investors wealth is eroding, and when this is eroding, it means investment climate will become bleak. So this is one more problem, crisis, that our economy, Indian economy, is going to face, and we are of course witnessing this thing. Then he goes for giving some ideas about how to deal with this ongoing problem, crisis. Two things he emphasizes on. One is the monetary policy and the second is fiscal policy. On monetary policy, he is saying that it can stimulate demand. In fact, monetary policy is largely on the side of demand. So how this demand is stimulated? By lowering the policy rate, by injecting more and more liquidity, by reducing the cost of the credit, interest rate reduction is there. So all these things are there. So then in that case the demand is stimulated. But he is also saying that interest rate reduction, if it is getting reduced, then it will reduce the cost of credit, of course, but at the same time it may affect the savers also, because when the policy rate is reduced, then monetary transmission is expected on the side of the bank, so they reduce the lending rate. When they reduce the lending rate, they are going to reduce the borrowing rate also, so savers may be affected. So this is one rider he is saying while reducing this policy rate. Then this he also suggests some temporary things. One is the repayment to bank can be delayed for those sectors which are facing crisis, and second suggestion, that relaxation of NPA recognition rules. So but these are on temporary ground, for temporary period. This is how he is saying. Then the second tool he is talking about is fiscal policy, but here he is saying that fiscal policy is already constrained and fiscal deficit in India is already, we are trying to have that fiscal deficit contained as per the FRBM Act also. So this is one thing, that fiscal capacity in India is already constrained. Also revenues are likely to go down given this lockdown, given all this crisis, and the break of all the economic activities, various types of economic activities. But he is also saying that we have no option but to fight corona crisis. It should be the foremost priority. So he is saying that we should mobilize adequate resources to meet all health related expenditures. This is one aspect. Then further he is also emphasizing on job sector crisis. We can see how in recent times these migrant laborers are coming back to their home states. This crisis is going on. So this sector also he is emphasizing on, and he is saying that there should be appeal to business units to keep even non-permanent workers on their roles, although with minimal income, and not retrench them. This should one important aspect. This is one important aspect where government should focus on. Secondly, government may also try to work for those sectors which are in crisis, for example hospitality, travel, tourism sector, and if any payment of dues is there, some dues are there to the government, so deferment of that payments can be also introduced. In fact, we can see that government is already taking several fiscal policy related steps. Some special package has been announced, because this is not appropriate place to tell all these things. Finance minister has also announced many fiscal policy actions, fiscal policy things related, some announcements also. So we will see that some other time. Lastly, to conclude, he is saying that fiscal deficit will go up because public spending will be required, and when this public spending by the government will be required, then the government will be borrowing more and more, and at the same time when the fiscal deficit is there, monetization of that deficit is also required, will also be required. So given all these things, what is what we are going to witness is injection of liquidity. More and more liquidity will be there, and when this situation is going to prevail, inflation will follow. This is how he is concluding. But the thing is that the virus crisis is really a very difficult situation for us, and given all these difficulties for our economy, we have to first fight with the virus crisis.